So this is Rebecca.
Hey,
Oh, did we check the routing table? I'm not sure if she can hear me. I don't think she can.
Tell me how badly I mess up your last name. Rebecca Man- Mabanglo-Mayor.
it's okay. It's all Oz.
I would
Mabanglo-Mayor.
imagine she's used to it.
Mabanglo-Mayor.
Mayor.
Ah, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Oh, hold it.
I can even
Before
tell
you
you
guys
about the
start,
origins if you'd like.
I would like to hear the that.
before you guys start,
So Mabanglo
Wait,
is
hang on
okay.
one sec.
you
What?
forgot to
worries.
start record, so
You got that?
now I'm going to do that now, I think.
Okay.
You just keep talking and
I
don't
had-
talk anything important.
I had forgotten to record. Okay, so
This is...
ready?
No.
We want
I haven't done this in a while, so...
Well, it's just here in the Zoom window, isn't
No,
it?
you do the Zoom window. You do that one. I need to set up the audio source. I forgot how to do this. It's been so long.
Oh, it's right there.
Okay, you start that one. I'll deal with my side.
This
Okay.
meeting is being recorded.
There we go.
References. Yeah, she can't hear me, so...
Yeah, so you can't hear. I gotta turn you up. You can't hear. Danny, is my mod tonight. You can't hear him, but I can. So that's why I'm talking to somebody and it's weird. There. Anyway, welcome, Rebecca.
Hi. It's good to be here.
So I was mentioning to my viewers, there's a couple of people in chat now, that you were coming on, and we were talking about what a book doula would be, and what a storyteller is. And I was guessing, but I think probably you should tell them that.
Okay. So a book doula is someone who helps a writer birth their book, and whatever birthing their book means. It could be that it's just trying to get from concept to first draft. It could be through the revision process. It could be through publication. For me, it's all about the writer's experience and what they want to get out of that experience. And I will help them the best way that I can with the skills that I have. I've been an editor for over, 20 years now, in both nonfiction as well as prose, fiction, and poetry. And so I bring a lot of skills to the table.
Fair.
And I have coached authors for, going on, I guess, 6 or 7 years now. And I've had the great pleasure to help, I think, upwards of 7 or 8 authors now get their books done.
Wow.
And then also, we're up to the 5th anthology. So about 100 new authors who've never been published before see their first publications. And there's nothing more exciting than that. It's just to
Yeah.
hold that book in your hand and go, look, I did it.
Yep.
And so I love that. And that's the reason why I do what I do with other writers, and why I call myself a doula. It's more interesting than coach in a lot of way. And then storyteller. A lot of people who write fiction, or prose writers in general, and probably poets too, they call themselves storytellers because they are using their form to tell a story, either from their own life, something they've observed. You could even say that scientific writers write stories, and they're telling the stories of the land or whatever observations they make. When I talk about being a storyteller, I'm a performance storyteller. And so for about 10 years, almost on a monthly basis, I would get up with a wonderful ensemble of storytellers from the Bellingham Storytellers Guild, and share stories from my heritage, which is in the Philippines. My father's Tagalog, my mother is Ilocano and Pangasinan, and which are areas in the Philippines. And so, because there are not a lot of performance storytellers who are also Filipino, um, I decided to focus just on those stories and to help audiences understand a little bit more about the stories that come from that archipelago, because I believe that stories hold, traditional stories especially, hold a traditional knowledge of a people, their point of view, as well as their values. And we can share, just like we share recipes among friends, we can share stories. And so that's my other hat, is performance storytelling.
Right. I was guessing storytelling being. I told you that Philidith, the name of my publishing company, means the bard, and in my culture, the bard was the dude that went around from village to village carrying the news in his
Hmm.
songs and his stories,
Yep.
and carried the legends and the myths and of of the of the area too. So
Yeah, held the people together.
absolutely, yeah. So
Yeah,
Back.
I think the heritage of storytelling is still live and well,
for
and
sure.
I really like that you bring your Filipino stories out. That's awesome. I
Thank
have
you.
we have quite a Filipino community here in Victoria, and
Yes,
and
we're everywhere.
yeah, it's yeah, I'm sure they would enjoy to have you come visit and tell your stories. Yeah,
Yeah, I'd
that
love
would
that.
make them feel at home. Anyways, you have a book out,
Yes,
and you are working on another one,
right.
right? So you're going to read to us from the one that's out.
Sure. I'll flash it up on the screen and can't see it. It's called Dancing Between Bamboo Poles, and it's a collection of poetry and prose. Is there a particular part of the book you want me to start with?
No,
Nope.
it's up to you
It's
what you would like to share.
okay. So I'm going to start with what's actually the last essay in the collection. It's called Kapwa Tao, and it kind of frames uh, just how I come to be, how I am on the page. Um, and because I am a US born Filipino, um, I have a little bit different experience than someone who has come over as an immigrant, or either as a young person or as a person who is an adult. And so kapwa tao means tao is people, kapwa is uh, community. So kapwa tao is community. Growing up in all-white schools in a bedroom community beyond the suburbs of Seattle, I never thought much about being other than what I saw. Creamy-skinned girls, some with blue eyes, some with brown. Some shorter and stouter than me, some taller and more athletic. But we were all girls who wore red, white, and blue plaid skirts, white sailor shirts, and red sweaters, the uniform of St. Vincent de Paul's School. We were all terrified of Sister Patricia, the principal, and we all loved Aries, the golden retriever who sat at our feet when we read books in the library. Being an only child, I wanted to learn the games the others seemed to know much better than I did, the jump rope songs and the hand clap rhythms. One cold November morning, I sat with two of my friends on a concrete pipe as broad as a horse. The cold surface stung my thighs and the wind lifted my hair into my eyes, but it didn't matter much to me. My friends were teaching me a complicated sing-song chant complete with hand gestures. They moved their fingers up and down on their faces, then brought one arm out and formed the fingers of the other hand into an inverted V, wiggling them as if they were legs. They waved a single pointer finger in the air dismissively, looked very serious, and then clapped each other's hands, missing at the last beat. They laughed, and I laughed with them. Teach me, I said. They looked at me, then at each other, then shrugged. I followed their movements as they slanted their eyes up and bobbed their heads. Chi-chi Chinaman sitting on a fence, they chanted. Tried to make $1 out of 99 cents. He missed. He missed. He missed like this. I missed their hands just as they had done before and laughed. But they didn't laugh with me. They just looked at me and then whispered to each other. Don't tell your mother we did that, said the blonde-haired girl. The brown eyes of the other girl looked serious. She won't like it. I shrugged and wanted to know why, but they wouldn't tell me. I tried to imagine why I'd get in trouble for showing my mother this new chant. There wasn't any swear words, and they didn't say anything bad about God or the Virgin Mother. To my thinking, it was just a story about a Chinese miner, like the ones we were reading about in history class, who had a hard time making ends meet. I wanted to laugh about how we missed each other's hands at the end, but somehow I knew they wouldn't like that, wouldn't like me doing the chant with them. What I didn't know then and wouldn't know for decades was this chant would be the first time I felt suddenly invisible. One moment I was an invisible girl on a concrete pipe playing with her friends at recess. The next I was the girl of color who didn't know her eyes were already foreign and didn't need the help of fingertips to change their shape. They saw me in ways I didn't see myself because I yearned to be one of them, young, Caucasian, and belonging. During the summer, my parents would take me to the Filipino community events where I felt a different kind of invisibility and isolation. In the big community halls of Catholic churches or the Center House of Seattle, everyone seemed to have something important to do, too. Girls floated by with their mestiza dresses while boys struggled to keep their barong Tagalog shirts straight over their black pants. Everyone seemed to know the songs that were sung and the dances performed, while to me they seemed strange and outside my own life. No one spoke to me, no child approached me, and I followed my parents around as they visited friends. They spoke in Tagalog instead of English, and I found myself under the scrutiny of someone I didn't know. They would ask me about school and admonish me to work hard to get good grades. She's getting so tall, a family friend would say, and her English is perfect. My mother would nod and respond in Tagalog. They would laugh and look at me again. I tried to guess what was said between them, then watched as disappointment changed their friendly faces. But you don't know how to speak, huh? The family friend would say as she shook her head in pity. American-born. My father would tug his ear nervously, and my mother would chuckle, then explain something in Ilocano to her friend. She doesn't have an accent, my mother would say, finally in English, her voice slow as she carefully pronounced each word. Better for school. She doesn't need Tagalog for school. The friend would nod in seeming agreement and continue their conversation in Tagalog. I would begin to fidget, and my parents would send me to play with the other children. At larger family events, we child strangers eyed each other warily. Cousins and siblings clung to each other, sharing jokes only they understood. The rise and fall of Filipino dialects at the event overwhelmed me and made me sleepy. I longed to go home and watch Gilligan's Island and the Carol Burnett show on TV instead of in the quiet of our Rambler. When the singing and dancing performances started, I hung back from the others, unsure what songs meant or why they seemed so important to everyone. They had all immigrated to the United States for a better life, so why did they keep trying to go back to the Philippines during these events? Once I was back in my familiar, nearly all-white school and parish, it was just easier to forget to see myself as a U.S.-born Filipina. Being just an American girl was all I wanted. At least that's what I thought as a teen. In college, I had studied physics and mathematics, but also began looking for something I couldn't describe to myself or to others. In the early and mid-'80s, many of my coworkers at WSU's Residence Life and Housing were searching too, exploring crystals, channeling, and anything written by Shirley MacLaine. Once again, I wanted to know what my Caucasian peers knew, but instead found myself the center of attention. Apparently, my ethnicity was a sign of great inherent wisdom, and my friends and I were often disappointed when I didn't seem to know anything about feng shui or Zen Buddhism right off the top of my black-haired head. I threw myself into studying Celtic, Native American, and Eastern philosophy just to keep up with their conversations. I scanned bookstore shelves looking for anything about Filipino spiritual practices, but my searches usually led me either nowhere or to text about lost tribes who had no word for war. After a few years of searching, I gave up on finding anything spiritual or indigenous to my heritage and continue living the borrowed life of a person of color passing as white. At one point, I went so far as to create a persona based on a woman living in the 15th century Scotland in order to participate in a pre-Renaissance reenactors group called the Society for Creative Anachronisms. Even traveling to the Philippines in 1995 did little to ease the longing my search had become, a longing for something that seemed both outside myself and inside at the same time. To me, it seemed that after almost 500 years of colonization, there was little information about pre-Spanish spiritual practices in the archipelago we know commonly as the Philippines, let alone any current practitioners of those systems. About 5 years ago, I came across the term Babaylan in the work of Lenny Strobel. I found both soon after making contact with Phil Am and prose poetry artists online. One writer mentioned the Babaylan as a mythic figure in their writing, and I wondered if there was a piece of my heritage that resonated with what I'd learned from studying the indigenous practices of Europe, the Americas, and Australia. Others define the Babaylan as religious leaders, often women, who were warriors, healers, or psychic visionaries who were killed during Spanish colonization. All record of their existence had been erased. During my childhood, my family and Filipino community never spoke of Babaylans, perhaps because of their strong Catholic faith. Were Babaylans myth or truth? If Babaylans existed before the Spanish erased their existence from the culture, then maybe I could at least find stories about Babaylans and reconstruct their practices by comparing them to what I knew from other cultures. When I contacted Lenny, she referred me to several texts, each difficult to find and requiring patience, as interlibrary loan systems shuffled books from one location to another. When the books finally arrived, I was disappointed to find that they were not easy texts to read, focusing more on the role of Babaylans in his or her community and not on the practices themselves. I wanted to see images of them in paintings and statues, or perhaps objects they used for ritual, to have something tangible to confirm a deeper connection to my heritage than I ever thought possible. In 2009, I was excited to hear that Lenny and a group of others were planning an event designed to gather everyone interested in Babaylans and Babaylan practices together. The first International Babaylan Conference was her brainchild, and it flourished under her leadership. Before the conference, the different parts of myself and previous experiences were like the jumbled tumblers of inside a combination lock. From the moment I stepped into my suite and joined the small group of women who I would live with for the next few nights, it was as if a tumbler of a worn lock would turn and fall into place. Then another, then another. A song would be sung, thunk. A passing prayer whispered, thunk. A term, thunk. A chant, thunk. Pieces fell into place that I thought were forever separated because of time and circumstance. Each moment opened the lock that had been set every time I experienced a moment of disconnection from myself and my heritage while I was growing up. At the conference, I learned that I just needed a reflection in someone else's experience to affirm that what I'd known before. I stopped second guessing myself. I stopped feeling outside my own culture. I stopped holding back just in case it wasn't safe to be myself. I stopped feeling isolated under the scrutiny of others and began to feel visible in a new community as I expressed an authenticity of self I felt emerging. We celebrated as kapwa-tao, like-hearted beings with a mission to heal each other and to be healed. Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. Amazing. I was nodding my head. Some similarities in life experience there.
Yeah, it's a struggle to be so detached from your spiritual land base and then try to piece it together on someone else's land base. And at this point, I want to acknowledge that I live and am graced with the presence of the Lummi people, the Lakhtamish people, the Nooksack, on whose land I live and work now. So I appreciate their generosity.
Huh. Yes. I am in the Esquimalt and nation's area
Wonderful.
myself, and
Yeah.
am fortunate there. Um, so uh, I'm just trying to wrap my head around experience. Like, I mean, I grew up, um, you know, a white chick in, I guess, a privileged setting. I didn't feel I was privileged at the time, but I can see,
Hmm.
retrospect, definitely privileged. I was middle class Ontario,
Yeah.
um, but I was raised as a reorganized Latter-day Saint,
Mm.
and so it's a little bit different, but there is the impact of a faith. And then I went on a search for
Hmm.
a Celtic shamanism,
Sure.
which fit much better.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and much freer expression of gifts and so on.
Awesome.
So I can I can relate on some level, but I always knew who my ancestors were. My family's very big on genealogy,
Hmm.
and I knew from whence I came. If I did not know how many generations back the the spirituality that I was seeking was at. So I can't imagine what your experience was like. I I think that it's wonderful that you're able to express that.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's but the yearning, right? You can relate to the yearning
absolutely. Yeah.
of an authentic spiritual connection. I mean, you searched for it, I searched for it. That's the same, and yeah.
So, anyways, that was a very moving essay.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm looking to see if there's any comments. A couple of ahs in there. So, does what coming from that space, I can see where you would want to help other people put their words on paper. I can see how therapeutic that it likely has been for you to be able to
Hmm.
do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Part of it too is a little bit selfish because I would have people come up to me after performances and say, "Oh, you're so lucky. You have a heritage." And I this was not an indigenous person who was standing in front of me. This was someone from Europe, um, but was probably, a couple of generations in on this continent, and they felt totally disconnected from their culture, or their culture, was American. And so part of encouraging people to tell their stories and to look up their original folk tales is so they don't have to go to anybody else for theirs. So, yes, it's important to reconnect with who you are, your truth, your experiences, your perspective on life, because there is no one else who has the same perspective as you do as a writer, as a performer. But it gives me the space to be me instead of trying to carry everything else at the same time. So yeah, that's the selfish part.
And the storytelling. I'm I do readings
Mhm.
myself, right? And I'm with you on that. But the storytelling, having stuff memorized. But I guess if you're telling the story, then it's coming from your living space, and it would be just like
Yes.
reciting memories, right?
So here's the thing with retelling folk tales. If you were to get a dozen people together in a room and ask them, can you retell Little Red Riding Hood? Pretty much everyone could from memory, right? Or
Okay.
Cinderella. but the way they retell it is going to be completely different. Some are going to emphasize, if it's Little Red Riding Hood, maybe the wolf is cheekier or the grandmother is hard of hearing or something like that. They make it their own. And I was trained as a type of storyteller who didn't memorize the stories. We memorize the bones of the stories. What makes Cinderella different from Little Red Riding Hood? So once the bones are in, that's the only thing that I memorize. Then I can flex the story depending on the audience. If it's all kids, then it's going to have to be super physical, and there's lots of expression and pauses, and there might even be call and responses where they're shouting back repeated phrases. If it's adults, it could be just a little bit more intellectual, maybe a little bit more reminiscent, things like this. I once was brought in to tell what I thought was a standard length story, about 7 to 10 minutes long, and at a venue, and I was with two other storytellers. We get to the venue and we find out that no, it's 10 minutes for all three of us, which meant that each of our stories had to reduce from 7 to 10 minutes to 3.
Oh dear.
And if you memorize a story, you're toast. There's no way.
Yep.
But because all of us were trained in this way, we had no problem. It was like, oh, okay, you want it 3 minutes? Okay, yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit faster, but I'm going to be super efficient with what I tell. I'm only going to hit what absolutely has to be told. And then other times I've told the very same story for 20 minutes. And in a way that I hope didn't drag, So if storytelling is something you want to do, I think you could do it. I mean, you do this, you talk to people, and so, yeah, you could retell a tale.
That's true. Shooting the shit has never been an issue for me.
Nope.
There you go.
Not at all.
But yeah, I was thinking too. You do kind of be aware of your audience and leave out this, or I've done that even as in a reading. I've thought, okay, well, I'm going to skip this paragraph and go over here. And, yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
You do that.
You start to feel the drag on the audience. And you're like, okay, you edit on the fly.
Yeah.
Totally
Absolutely.
legit.
So, are you musically inclined as well?
Yeah, I am one of those classic straight A piano playing Asian girls. So I learned how to play the piano when I was 4, and I think I studied for like 10 years, and did minor compositions off and on. I wouldn't call it my strong suit, and that's because I've performed with a lot of amazing musicians over the years who just make my jaw drop. Swill Canham, who's a virtuoso violinist from Lemmy Nation, Gene Tagaban, also known as the Raven Dancer, J.P. Falcon, who plays blues and jazz. I mean, those are real musicians in my mind. I can plunk out a tune or two and I can read music. But that does help me with rhythms and to hear, because I don't edit by sight. I edit by how it sounds. And to me, words have music to them. So that's where the two disciplines kind of overlap.
Yeah, I was thinking that I've seen your poetry, and I was thinking that there's a what do you call a cadence that comes when you have the music in your head when you're writing.
Yeah.
And I see that in your stuff, so I figured.
Oh, thanks.
I figured that. Somebody says, "Wow, multi-talented too." Woot.
Woohoo! Thanks.
Speaking of poetry, did you have? There's some in that book. is there
Sure,
not?
there is some in
Yeah,
this
can't
book.
see the chat either, can she?
So what the reason why these particular poems are in this book is because they were all written during April Poetry Month back in 2015. And I set a challenge for myself. I was blocked as a writer. I could not get going on my prose. The task was to write a poem a day for 30 days. And I would end up with 30 poems. But I was going to do it a little bit differently. I wasn't going to just sit down and write stuff. I was going to pull a book off the shelf, randomly choose a page out of that book, copy it on a Xerox machine, and then take out words. My only rule was I had to leave one word on each line and see if I could create a poem out of that. And they're called redaction poems. And I do want to say this was before a certain previous U.S. president. Can you still hear me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You froze a bit there, but now you're
sorry. That's what I was concerned about. So there was a certain U.S. president who is known for his redactions. I just want to say I did it first. I think I did it better. And sometimes I would take a word out that I later would regret. It would have been beautiful to be in the line, but I never went back. I used whatever was taken out, whatever was left in, was left in. And I took these books from anywhere. I was teaching at Northwest Indian College at the time, so I'd pull them off my shelf. I would pull them off the shelf in the tutoring center. So I will let you know where each one of these poems came from. The first one is Muskeg. Exposed and scrubby, proceed north along the wide coastal landscape covered with peatlands. Travel to Prince Rupert. Thread your way, stunted and gnarled, to large pools of yellow pondweeds snaking between thick forest of bog laurel and common juniper in the humid, subdued slopes of considerable steepness. Seek Muskeg in the west like the Queen or Hecate or Alexander. Find the continuous tangle, diverse and mixing with Indian, hellebore, and partridge foot. Misapprehension of place, sense of proportion lost. A way of seeing predicated on balance. Move from sight to insight. Create a vision and understanding of place. Creation began a story older than this place. These steps, that bramble, tangle, water churn. Interpretation alone is fitting, looking away from the light that is God. Composed of redactions taken from texts found in Plants of the Pacific Northwest Coast by Jim Pohar and Andy McMinnon, and Reasoning Together, edited by Janice Acus.
That came from a plant book.
A plant book mixed with a critical thinking book. Those were two books.
Ah. Interesting.
Would you like another?
Yes.
Trespassing. So ancient is attributing a difficult common past with borders which have moved with conquest. North and South share varieties which differ only regionally. Garbures and melted cheese have a common heritage left by domination, the trade of crops exposed by the wake of Christopher Columbus in a single revolutionary event. Native means merely before there, to the question, what is native? What is imported? No inconsiderable number of cursory tales reveal how and when importation occurred over many routes, circled the globe east to west, like germs widespread before the arrival of civilization and culture. A specific case. Coastal towns feared raids long before white feet. Conflicts with pirates imbue the legends. Conquests, pervasive and persuasive in its instruction, charts its own course, landscaping generations. Composed of redactions taken from text found in The Old World Kitchen by Elizabeth Luard and Filipino Folktales by Dean Fansler. Again, a double merging text.
I like the blending.
You like the blending?
Yeah.
Blending's working for you?
Yeah.
I'm trying to find one that might be. Okay, here we go. Sensitivity tests. Such cases may be analyzed by methods, for others, or by an assumption of normality, rough but quick for the critical plot of items exploding commercially. A straight line by eye suggests a transformation, give approximate normality, fitting more precisely, a measure, more efficient. When they are recommended, the effect is known immediately, readily adjusted. The change described is not practical. The ultimate effects are measured on small animals, such as hamsters or mice. If it is inconvenient, tests of rockets is appropriate for detailed application and reliability. Composed of redactions taken from texts found in Statistics Manual by Edwin L. Crow, Francis A. Davis, and Margaret W. Maxfield. So no text was ever safe from me and my Sharpie.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That sounds like fun to do.
it is, and it's so low stakes in my opinion because it's someone else's words and you're taking them away. Um, I've seen people do redactions and then add their own words in, which is perfectly fine to make them more interesting. Think of them as like collages, and you add and subtract as you want, and they're fun.
Right.
They're fun.
You have to keep them in the same order they were in the book.
I put that as my rule.
They have to stay in the same order.
They had to stay in the same order. They had to be in the same line. So if those words appeared on one line, they all stayed together. I might space in between to show the redaction, but that's it. But then when I went to the second line, then that was the second line of the poem. Yeah.
Wow, that even makes it trickier. Huh?
It was fun posting them on Facebook and get people's reactions as to what I was doing to the texts. So, yeah.
Very good. So, talk to me about your anthology projects.
So I'm involved with a wonderful program called the Narrative Project. And it was begun by Cami Ostman, I want to say 7 years ago now. And the idea was to create a program where new writers could write the first draft of their book within 9 months. And so it's a combination of classes, craft classes, and then critique group, because the program, and I agree with this, really believes that to be a better writer, you need to, increase your skills, then you try them out, and then you try them out on an audience. And that's what critique group is all about. And our critique groups are to help the writers become better. They're not, this is a terrible idea, you shouldn't do this. It's about, okay, I got confused here, but if you added just a little bit, maybe I could understand it better and, keep going. And then once we had enough people come through, we put out our first anthology. And it is just called True Stories, the Narrative Project Volume 1. And we are in the process right now of editing Volume 5.
Wow.
Which is pretty exciting. I think that's right.
So how many, on the average in those 5 volumes, how many in each one authors?
I am wrong. We are on Volume 4. My apologies. So Volume 3, that was on the short side. So it's between 15 and 25 authors. It really depends on how many authors that we have within the program at the time. And it's usually an excerpt from their book. And so they can take that excerpt and, take it to an agent, take it to a publisher and say, hey, this excerpt was published in an anthology. Would you like to take a look at the rest of the book? So it's also kind of their calling card. It becomes a calling card for both the author as well as the program.
That's a good idea.
And it's a great thing, and it's so exciting to watch, especially first time authors go through that process. If a writer, the majority of the writers are out there, they're producing the work, prose poetry. They do their best. They might have some beta readers or critique group. They get it all fleshed out and they start sending it out to places. And they might not hear for weeks, months, years before their piece is picked up. And they might get discouraged. And then even if their piece gets picked up, then they have to go through the editorial process where they have to take this thing they thought was finished and then go back and forth with the editor on changes. And then they have to wait for it to come out and then, get the copies and. What's nice about creating the anthologies is that we give the authors that experience after they finish the program, after they've gotten the first draft of their book done. We give them that concentrated experience of finding their best piece, polishing it up, go through the editorial process, and we can tell them, okay, your piece is due by this date. Your changes are due by this date. Publication is on this date. You're going to be reading to an audience at this location on this date. And they get to have that book in their hand and show their people. And, when we did the readings live, I would take my anthology around and I get people's signatures because it's kind of like our yearbook, right? And
Absolutely, yes.
we're like cheering each other on. It's like, okay, and see your book. And then, so there are people who are in the first anthology who have published their book, and I think in the second anthology too, who have published their books since then. And so now, we're out there, we're at their readings, cheering them on. Let's do this. Doing the marketing for each other, boosting each other up. And so the program creates this really wonderfully robust community of writers. And in my opinion, the way it should be done, which is not that we're like trying to elbow each other to get to the front of the line and get to that, perfect publisher, perfect editor, whatever, perfect contract. We're together as a community, expressing ourselves and celebrating each other. I really think it could be that way,
Yes.
And I would love it to be that way more.
Yes. I have. We have done 3 anthologies now.
Wow, that's great.
Based out of. I have a writers group called the Eclectic Writers Boot Camp, and we would meet. We haven't met in real life now for quite COVID.
I'm sure.
But before that, we were meeting once a month and would do writing prompts and bring our workshop, our pieces that we were working on and that thing. And the thing was, your intent was to get published.
Yeah.
You were serious enough about it that that's actually on the table.
Right.
And so then they worked together, and there was a sense of community there too. And so we did. I had thought of this idea for an anthology years before, and one of the authors that was coming says, "Remember that? Why don't we do that? Why don't we actually do that?" Okay. So the first one was Anthology for a Green Planet.
Beautiful.
And the concept was that this short story had to have something in there of green technology, but not in a preachy way. That it was just part of the story.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of sci-fi, and a couple of really historical type pieces too, which was kind of interesting.
Cool.
And the anthology was pulled together. There was, I think, I'm going to say 8 authors on that one. And the each author gets a bio page before their piece, and their name is on there as an author, one of the authors of the thing. And then the proceeds to sales of the book go to a charity that we've selected for that one. It was a
Wonderful.
guy that does it's called Pedal to Petal, and he rides around on his bike and picks up kitchen scraps and makes compost.
Nice.
Right, and so we the proceeds of the book went to that, and everyone got a copy, and then you know, we did that thing where you pass around, everybody signs it, so like you say, it's like a yearbook. And that was the first one, and then the second one was called the Unvalentine Anthology, and
Ooh.
it was unusual love stories.
Oh.
And I think there was 15 people in that one, authors in that one,
Yeah.
and there was people that were coming to the writers group that a couple of guys are like, I can't write romance, come on. And we're like, you don't know till you try.
Mm-hmm.
And those were actually the strongest pieces in the collection. It was kind of funny.
Took nothing for granted. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, they get their bio page and they get their copies, and so then their friends are buying the book to support them. The charity is buying stuff to support that, and so then unknown authors, there's a couple of them there was a very first, like you say, very first piece ever published. They're getting amazing feedback, and we made them come to open mics and read their pieces too.
That's great.
So, and then they'd get applause and all that stuff. So it was basically win-win-win. The charity for that one is an organization called Peers that supports sex trade workers.
Oh, okay.
And then we did Blood Moon Rising Anthology, which was creepy stories. Think you know, like Easter and resurrection and rebirth and that kind of stuff. It ended up being a lot of creepy stories. I was expecting to get 100% zombie stories, but we didn't get it, even one. And
that is unusual.
Yeah, and there was 12 or 13 authors in that one as well. Couple of these were excerpts from books that were going to be published later that have since been published, but a lot of those were also, again, one-time people who have never published before.
Yeah.
And the same thing in AIDS Vancouver Island was the charity for that one.
Oh, that's awesome.
So there was
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
So it was a bit of community and community outreach as part of the process.
Yeah.
So that was pretty good. Yeah.
Good on you all.
Yeah, and then since then, we've done this one.
Oh, yeah.
Which is for sharing our journeys. Queer elders tell their stories. It's for Alexandra House in Surrey, and
okay.
Again, it was like yours, a group who were taking a course together. It was a writing group at this Alexandra House. There's a community queer community center sort of operation. Anyways, it was for them, and they started out telling their stories because they were working with the youth group, and the youth group were taking the photographs and they were telling their stories, and then they were working on writing their stories out. Some pretty profound stories of what it was like to come out in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, these are why we're where we're at now, is people like that, right? And now
exactly.
They push through things, right? So and so that's another one. And again, there's the sense of community, and I think there was one person there's I think 15 authors in that one too. There's one person there that has been published before and worked in the media and all that, but the rest of them was a completely new cup of tea, and they had a special event for them at Alexandra House, book launch type thing, and then I managed to get them into chapters for a authors signing.
Yeah.
Right, the ones here, they're here in Victoria. There's a couple that were here in Victoria. Most of them were in Vancouver.
Yeah.
The ones that were here in Victoria, and they were just so thrilled to be sitting there signing copies of their book.
Yeah.
And it was just
There's
amazing.
nothing like it.
Yeah, it was quite fun, and you know, we'd have people come up and come to the table and, well, what's this about? And they were explaining. And I said, well, you're the author. You explain. I'm just here holding the book. Like, It was very fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really like the the look on your face.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like when you're a parent and your kid, you're or you're raising a kid and the little a light bulb goes off over their head and they get
Mm-hmm.
something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's that same sort of
Yeah.
expression on their faces, like, oh, this is what it feels like to be
Yeah.
validated.
Yeah.
Holy cow, this is
And
awesome.
seen.
And
Yeah.
seen. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
quite the experience.
Yes.
And again, I go back to your book doula angle. I quite identify with that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That bringing that out and having them experience that.
Yeah.
It is amazing stuff.
Well, and especially for marginalized groups, because, you know, told from basically the get-go, your story is second to everything, and not seeing themselves in the media, right? To be brave enough to speak the truth of their experience, and be able to help someone do that. I mean, it's a great honor,
Oh, absolutely.
and it's a beautiful thing. And like you said, you get jazzed. You get jazzed at seeing people who overlooked, maligned, whatever, blossom under this positive experience that they never thought anyone would care, at least not care about in a good way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Especially the elders, like you said, they survived so much. 70s, 80s, it's just amazing what they did to advance LGBTQI plus things. We would not have what we have right now if it were not for them and their bravery and their ability to grieve on one hand the people who were dying, and hold hope in the other hand that we will survive this and it can be better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely our heroes.
Yeah, for sure.
We're working on another one. This is
Great.
the guy that was who taught that class at Alexander House, acted as editor for the collection, and
Mhm.
he's one of my authors, one of my clients, and
Yeah.
so anyways, I worked with him on that project. He has another one coming that
Mhm.
is sharing our journeys too, which is queer elders of color tell their
Wonderful.
stories. Yeah, so he's
Yeah.
got 2 or 3 so far. Um, sometimes it's like I say, a bit like herding cats to get people to put themselves forward, because I think people are so used to not being appreciated that they
Mhm.
don't really want to risk the potential rejection of
Right.
putting
Right.
themselves
And then
out, right?
yeah, and then it's a classic colonialist move to keep marginalized groups separated, right? So they don't realize they're more. I mean, if all of the minorities got together, if all the marginalized peoples got together and turned their face to white privilege, um, it's going to crumble. That's just the way it would happen. So better to keep everyone thinking they are in a small group when in fact they are part of a much larger group. So it could be simply that the elder queer community of color just hasn't heard that it's happening.
Yeah, it could be.
And it outreach can be so tough across the margins in a sense. But yeah, I can put my head to it and see if I've got some connections up in your area that we can start getting that community hooked up, because it would be wonderful to see.
I think Gloria, our mutual friend, is working on something.
Yes.
Is working on something for him, and I don't know if you
She's
know. Do you know CJ?
possibly.
I think she's working on something too.
Yeah. So Gloria is in the narrative project right now.
Oh, is she?
Yeah, yeah. She's one of our participants. She's great. Um, but yeah, I suspect between the two of us, we can find you authors.
There we go. Because I would like to see that happen. Like I
Yeah.
said, I know what the reaction and the feedback from the first one was,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and it's well supported. Like I show it once and I've got 12 copies sold. Like it just people are so excited
Sure.
to support that. And
Yeah.
but I wonder sometimes if there's a bit of hesitancy to participate because uh, it, it feels a bit sketchy that we're asking why are we asking for this? Why all of a sudden do we want
Hmm.
to do this? And that's unfortunate because it's
Yeah.
absolutely a genuine thing. But I mean, I've seen poetry contests and that end up being yes, but you have to buy the $50 book to have your little
Yeah.
poem in it. Those
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah. Hmm.
scams, and I understand people
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
concerned for sure.
Yeah. And that's the reason why you've got to have someone essentially within the community vouching for you, saying, yeah, no,
Yeah,
this is legit. And here, look, here's this other anthology, well received. Would love to see this other um, come through. Um, and then there's just right now there is, I think, in a good way, so much attention on people of color right now. Um, it's hard to know where to kind of focus our energy without losing time to write, you know,
yeah.
and things like this. And so it can be a combination of things. Um,
Also,
but I
COVID's been a bit impactful that way too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. I think so. Um, but I suspect that once the word gets out and, you know, it's great that Gloria is there and Gloria can find, if she finds one author and that author finds an author, you know, and we just keep that train going. Is Would you be open to authors over the border too in my
Absolutely,
part? Great.
absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, then I can find an author, and I don't know where your elder cutoff is.
I think if that well, that might be the other issue too. Do you view yourself as an elder?
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
I know I don't.
I know. And traditionally, at least from what I hear from my Lummi friends, if you hit 50, then you are an elder. And I thought that was very surprising because I'm going to be 56 this year, and I certainly don't feel like I can dispense advice. But it also has to do with on how long do you think the the people are going to live. And when you're talking about people of color in the LGBT community, our life expectancy is shorter. So in a lot of ways, yeah, we are elders.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I have lots to learn. Hmm.
Hey, that just means you're an open human being, and that's awesome.
I'm 61 and I don't feel like I'm an elder.
Yeah. And it's something that the community brings to you. It looks to you and says, oh, yeah, you know stuff. And you do. You know publishing?
Well, that's true, and I'm a source in the poly community too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Right. So,
Yep.
but
You,
I wouldn't say because I don't think there are experts, really. I think
that's
there's
because you have wisdom
ah
and
okay,
and humility, which sometimes can be lacking in all communities, right?
true
Not
enough,
just those communities.
true enough.
So, um, what the traditional elders have taught me in this area is it's it's an honor that you take on, um, and it's a responsibility to help the younger ones coming up, because if they can't look to us, who are they going to look to? Yeah, we might not know everything, but they shouldn't feel alone just because we're afraid that we don't have all the answers.
Maybe it's not about having the answers, but understanding how to find those.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's pretty much what I said to my replacement when I retired.
There you go.
I'm not gonna dump my brain into your head. It's not happening. But
Yep.
here's the roadmap to find what you need to find.
Right.
And
Right.
maybe
Here's some tips and tricks, but leave them if you don't need them.
yeah. So we're signposts in the road of life, are we?
Yeah. Exactly.
Whatever you want to do, don't go that way.
Yeah. Unless you want to have a really amazing, not so great adventure, and then you can talk to me afterwards, and I'll tell you, what happened to me, and then it becomes community building too.
Yeah, that's where the storytelling
Exactly.
comes in.
Exactly.
All right, so you said to me that you have a sci-fi book that you're working on. Can
I
you give us
do.
a sneak peek of that?
Sure. Okay. So, Maganda's Comb is the working title, and let's see. I have to bring it up. Where is it? My apologies. So the premise behind Maganda's Comb is along the lines of like authors like Charles DeLint and Neil Gaiman. So Charles DeLint's Moonheart, Yarrow, Wind in His Wings, Neil Gaiman's American Gods. So what happens when the spirits of the Philippines meet the spirits of the Coast Salish people and the humans in between is essentially the concept. And so I will read you a little bit here. My apologies. Should have brought this up. So in this is from the first chapter of the book. Our narrator is Corey, and she is headed back to her dorm room, and she's passing a courtyard. As she passed the media center and the empty stage where she performed earlier, she glanced back in time to see a black shape swoop toward her. She shouted sharply and put her arm up to ward away the shape as it dove toward her, then lifted soundlessly up to a nearby tree. Corey glanced up and realized it was the shape of an owl. "Don't do that," she whispered, glaring at the bird. For its part, the owl blinked placidly and watched Corey as she resumed her quick clip back to her dormitory. Benson Hall was a two-story dorm that sat on the other side of the administration building, and Corey decided to cut past the pavilion to reach her dorm room faster. The lawn looked deserted, the drums, the drummers, and dancers all gone, as Corey had expected, but the pavilion was lit from inside. She could see the dark shape of the totem pole outlined in a tall shadow moving within the pavilion. Assuming the carver was awake too, she altered her tracks, walked up the path to the now closed doorway, and pushed aside the flap. "Hello? Solomon?" she said. She poked her head inside. "It's me, Corey. Can I come in?" The carver turned with a smile. "Yes, of course," he said, gesturing for her to come closer. "You're up late." "Couldn't sleep. Just on my way home." "Couldn't either," Solomon said. "I was just about to shut things down for the night when I realized what kind of mouth opening the tree spirit wanted me to make." He gripped the tool in his right hand, braced himself against the wood with the other, and began scooping out shavings of cedar from the O-shaped opening she had seen him start earlier in the day. "It's a special opening for truth-telling," he explained, his voice high and fast with excitement. "On a mask, it would have a place for the dancer to rest his lips while he chanted a prophecy. I'm carving what look like lips right behind where the opening would be to make it look—" He broke off suddenly and gasped, his body lurching forward toward the pole. Corey took a step toward him and hand outstretched. "Solomon," she said, "are you okay?" His body shuddered as the carving tool dropped from his hand. His eyes were wide and his face were twisted in a grimace as if he were straining away from something. Outside, the wind whipped the pavilion roof and billowed past the front opening. For a moment, Corey thought the man was having a heart attack when a thick black shape began to ooze from the opening Solomon had made in the wood. The shape bubbled up like a slow fountain, fell back on itself, and built up again from underneath. With each passing moment, the black shape rose closer and closer to the carver until it seemed as if it would touch the very tip of his chin. Slowly and painfully, Solomon moved his right hand up to his head and grasped the feather tied to his hair. Corey wanted to scream and run, but she was frozen to the spot, her limbs not moving, her breath ragged with panic. She watched the carver yank the feather from his hair. For a moment it looked as if the white feather had turned into a silver knife as Solomon made a slashing movement between him and the black shape. The knife cut through the top of the black shape, sending droplets of the sticky ooze across the surface of the totem bowl. The black ooze seemed to retreat back into the opening and then burst forth again in a great swell that formed into the shape of a man's face, a man who screamed soundlessly. She heard Solomon yell as he moved towards the shape to block its path, and shoved her aside. Corey fell down roughly, her cheek hitting the soft grass and cedar shavings. She rolled onto her back and saw Solomon struggling with a black shape that looked, with each passing moment, more and more like a man. Corey tried to scoot away, but her muscles could barely move. Above her, the two men struggled hand to wrist, Solomon's face flushed with anger and sweat. At first, it seemed as if Solomon was going to force the man to kneel, but then the man's body formed completely. Where once stood a nearly formless black shape, instead a man dressed in black pants, high black leather boots, and a dirty white tunic bent Solomon backwards. His long brown hair fell to his shoulders, matted and damp, and his face was covered with a ragged beard and mustache. He was murmuring. Corey recognized the language as Spanish, but couldn't make out the words. The wind lifted the opening of the pavilion. On the gust, an owl swooped in and began to claw at the Spaniard's hair. He roared a curse and pushed Solomon aside as he struggled to release himself from the owl's grasp. The owl screeched loudly and flapped its wings, trying to stay out of the Spaniard's grasp. Solomon fell against the totem pole with a sickening crack and then slumped down next to Corey. The owl pulled on the Spaniard's hair and clothing, pecking at his face, wings flapping furiously. It looked as if the owl would gain the advantage, but suddenly the shapeshifter grabbed the owl's wing and tore the bird away, flinging it across the pavilion. It hit a pole at the far end of the pavilion and collapsed to the ground. The shapeshifter turned toward Corey once more, hand outstretched. "You are mine now, little one," a rasping voice echoed in Corey's mind. "Your sweetness is familiar." The Spaniard strode toward her. "Such a sweet thing," the voice boomed within her mind. "What's this in your hair?" With one swift move, Corey gathered her remaining strength and pushed her legs down to set her feet solidly on the ground, and swung the knife into the shapeshifter's body with a twist of her torso. A blaze of light filled the pavilion, blinding her, and the shapeshifter screamed in agony. Corey felt herself drop, and a wind rushed past as heaviness dropped her into unconsciousness.
Wow. I could smell the cedar.
Yeah.
Wow, that's sounds quite intriguing.
Yeah, so it's contemporary fantasy. So yeah. And it's a braided novel, which I'm not sure if you've ever heard, but Charles DeLint uses this method a lot, where it's more than one narrator and each one has a perspective on the same events, but none of the characters themselves know all of the story, but the reader does, and so they kind of go in and out of the story, and so it's very strange to write, but it's really satisfying because you get the story in different ways, and hopefully the reader is going to try to anticipate what's going to happen, who's really the bad guy, all of that sort of stuff. So
Interesting. I didn't know that there
Yeah.
was a name for that. I write like that too.
oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least my first novel was like that. Stephen King does that too. Different perspectives.
Oh, yeah.
Not always the same event though. Sometimes it picks up where the last one left off,
Sure.
but similar.
Sure. Yeah, Stephen
Yeah.
King, even though that was a pretty intense, horrific scene, I'm actually not a horror writer, so I've never read Stephen King, some short stuff, and I love his book on writing itself.
Yes, it's my
But
favorite.
yeah, I respect him tremendously, but he's so good that I can't read him.
I love his stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways, now I've learned something else. I didn't realize that you called it braided, but I could see why. Yes.
Yeah.
Ah, interesting. Okay, so I have been schooled on several things. Good stuff. Um,
I hope in a
I'm-
good way.
yeah, so absolutely.
Oh, good,
It's,
good.
it's always fun to learn new and different things.
Cool.
And I appreciate you sharing all of that with us.
Great.
I'm noticing you said 8 o'clock and we're past that for you. So
Yeah. Yeah.
do you need to go? Yes?
I do need to scoot.
Okay.
This has been delightful, and I wouldn't mind coming back if you want to have another conversation.
Absolutely. And maybe
Great.
we can do a group, bring Gloria on and
Ooh.
few others and have a conversation about
Oh, I'd love that.
writing. Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be
Yeah.
awesome. That would be awesome.
Yeah, see what I can get together.
Cool.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight.
Tell
Thanks
us
to.
tell us what your website is, where they can buy that book.
Oh, okay. So here you go. It's RebeccaMabanglo-Mayor.com. So R-E, B as in boy, E-C-C-A, M as in Mary, A, B as in boy, ANGLO-MAYOR.com. And I didn't get to tell you, Mabanglo-Mayor, Mabanglo in Pangasinan means sweet smelling. Mayor is from the Spanish meaning great. So that means I smell really good.
I love it.
So this has been a delight. Thanks to the listeners. And yes, I hope everyone has a good evening.
Yes, I'll put that website in the chat here and in the comment sections when this goes up to YouTube as well.
Fabulous. Yeah, send me the
Okay.
link.
Absolutely, I will do. So
All right.
thanks, Rebecca, and you have
Yeah.
yourself a good evening.
Thanks. Take care.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.